Good evening. This is Mottek On Money, and we're doing it live right here, 790 KBC. Also streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast for you at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. The Israel-Hamas war intensifies, a horrific and tumultuous week coming to a close here for the financial markets with a mixed finish today. For the week, the Dow actually managed a gain of nearly 1%. The S&P 500 rose about 0.5%, and the Nasdaq slipped 0.2%. The Dow snapping a three-week losing streak today, while the S&P 500 booked back-to-back weekly gains. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 39 points today. The S&P 500 slipped 22, and the Nasdaq plunged 167 points. We're following developments in Israel tonight. Israel's military has ordered 1 million people to leave Gaza, raising fears of a ground offensive. Could be underway soon, escalating tensions in the Middle East. We're watching what's happening here domestically with federal, state, and local law enforcement working around the clock to prevent any violence from occurring, according to the White House spokesman. President Biden directing the administration to do everything we can, in his words, to enhance security at home, including especially in the Jewish community and as well as the Muslim community. None of the U.S. intelligence agencies have any specific intelligence indicating a threat to the U.S. stemming from last week's attack by Hamas on Israel. A solidarity march for Israel is set for this weekend. Coming up later this hour, I'll be joined by Rabbi Marvin Heyer, one of the most influential rabbis in the world. Rabbi Heyer is the founder, CEO, and president of the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Museum of Tolerance in West Los Angeles. I'll also be joined later this hour by Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. She was honored by the Simon Wiesenthal Center this year with the Medal of Valor for defending human rights and for her work in highlighting the ongoing courageous protests by Iranian women against the Islamic Republic. We saw the price of oil spike again today, and consumer confidence has taken a big hit. Let's talk about all this now with the expert. And joining us live now is Jonathan Honig, Fox News contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, and author of the book Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. Jonathan Honig, thank you very much for taking the call here following the horrific attack on Israel last weekend, and we've seen quite a week here. Give us your reaction to these epic events this week and where we stand at this point.
Well, Frank, thank you for having me with you tonight. I mean, it almost seems foolish to talk at all about the machinations of the financial markets, given exactly, as you said, the utter horror, utter evil that we witnessed this past week in terms of the Islamic attacks on Israel. But we evaluate it. We keep an eye on your money. And, I was actually surprised that the markets were managed to eke out any sort of a gain this week, given all the bad news that we've continued to see, not just the unspeakable evil in the Middle East, but also some two individual reports indicating that inflation is still running pretty hot, certainly hotter than many analysts had expected. So although I'm happy to see that at least the Dow didn't fall too hard today, what worries me about stocks right now is that breadth, that underlying trend. Most stocks, in fact, are in downtrends, Frank. We've got almost 80% of stocks below their short-term moving average. And even today, you saw 400 new stocks at 52-week lows and only about 40 at 52-week highs. So you've got to follow that long-term trend when it comes to the markets. And at least for now, the trend for stocks, most stocks, is down.
On the live with Jonathan Honig, and it should also be noted that Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, the largest bank in the United States, let me quote him here now. He said, "This may be the most dangerous time the world has seen in decades." He reported on the earnings for the bank today, as well as the other big banks. Give us your assessment of what came out of his report today.
Well, I mean, look, it all comes down to your own individual situation, Frank. I mean, you've reported on these markets for so long. We've always seen stocks ultimately come back. We've always seen the fear pass if you have that truly long-term time horizon. But to Jamie Dimon's point, in the short term, I mean, you have interest rates continuing to go up, inflation not going away, and tremendous uncertainty, as we said, continuing in the Middle East. So, there's an old saying on Wall Street. I know you know them all, Frank, but as they say, when in doubt, stay out. And in terms of putting new money to work, I said, if you have money on the sidelines right now, I still think it's not a terrible idea to have extra cash, to have that extra savings, that extra cushion, given the fact there's still so much uncertainty. And frankly, simply, Frank, not a lot of stocks doing well right now. We're looking for trends, and the biggest trend I'm seeing is one you just mentioned, that is the continued escalation in oil prices. I think you can buy BP here, good old-fashioned British Petroleum, BP, or any of the major oil stocks. But they're really one of the few areas leading the market higher, given the world events.
Certainly, we did see that initial spike in the price of oil on Monday. Then it pulled back and moved higher here heading into the weekend on the expectation that we could see some major military action this weekend. Jonathan, how are you positioning yourself with that possibility here? Where do you see gas and oil prices go from here?
Well, I mean, we always talk about trying to play for that long term. And in the 1970s, Frank, I mean, one of the few areas of the market that did do well were oil stocks. And I think especially as now's the time when people are trying to find income, trying to find, areas of the market they can look for some dividend income. I like what are known as these master limited partnerships, MLPs. Most of them are tied or influenced by energy prices in some way. AMJ, that's Alabama Mary Jackson, AMJ. That's an ETF that we own over at CapitalistPig.com, Frank. And basically, it's a basket of these income-oriented energy stocks. You never want to bet the farm, but I think this is a type of name when you add not just price appreciation, but dividend as well, and then you can not only own right now, but actually sleep at night at the same time. AMJ, AMLP, and any of these ETFs tied to energy-oriented income.
We haven't talked about gold much, but it's getting new attention and moving higher today by more than 3%, back above 1,900 this week to 1,941.50 an ounce. What about gold here, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's really come back to life truly with these events in the Middle East. I mean, almost a 10% rise just in the last week, Frank, a massive move into gold. And I'm starting to see, in fact, some of those gold mining stocks come along for the ride here. AU is one that the ticker symbol is AU that actually recently ticked a 20-day high. So we're starting to see some of the gold names start to move a little bit back into favor. I don't think it's a full-blown bull market just yet. Given the strength of the dollar, we've seen gold actually really underperforming for quite some time. But the fact it's sprung back to life here, if you continue to see oil move higher, if you can continue to see the inflation number run hot, I think gold can get a bid. I certainly wouldn't on GLD.
On there live with Jonathan Honig. And as far as the Fed's next move, given these big developments lately, and as you mentioned, inflation still running hot at this point, certainly a lot hotter than the Fed would like to see. What do you think is going to be the Fed's next move? Are they going to raise rates again?
Boy, Frank, really does look like it. And given the fact that it's almost undescribable how much money has been lost in bonds. If you've owned a TLT, Frank, this is that long-term bond ETF. Just this year, you've lost about 15%. Now that's in a safe U.S. Government bond, a safe U.S. Treasury bond. So, this move in bonds has been so dramatic, but we always talk about how trends tend to persist. And, at least at this point, the trend for interest rates continues to be up. I think it's a difficult time to be an income investor for exactly that reason. Certainly a difficult time for the economy writ large, Frank. I mean, so many folks would like to move, we know, but they're locked in with the ultra low interest rates that probably won't be seen anytime for, once again, for decades. So this interest rate story isn't over just yet, and I think the move continues to be higher in the short or even intermediate term.
All right, so we're back to that hard landing possibility here. There was hope there would be a soft landing, but certainly a lot of the wall of worry is getting higher here, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And I think you have to respect the reality of those fears, Frank. I mean, we've seen so many of the so-called safe stocks, the preferred stocks, real estate investment trusts, dividend-oriented names. I mean, those have really been absolutely shellacked given the persistently higher interest rates. So it almost is a whole new era with these higher rates, this inflation running hot, and I just don't see fundamentally how that trend has shifted anytime soon. Now, there's going to be opportunities here. For example, I still like emerging markets. There was an interesting stat out this week, Frank. In fact, emerging markets are now as cheap as they've been anytime going back to 1987. So, for example, Pakistan is one that I like. PAK is the ticker symbol on that one. But I think now is the time for prudence. Now is the time for cash. Now is the time for, having some extra money on the sidelines, just given all the headline risk. And frankly, just so many weak stocks in the market overall. As I said, the average stock is heading downward, and that's a trend you don't want to be in.
Right, as you noted, a lot more new lows than new highs today. And what about the airlines here, given the global situation here? Would you touch any of the airline stocks which have been hit this week?
Wow, and not just even this week, Frank. I mean, the whole year, it's been really unbelievable. I mean, American Airlines has gone from $18 a share just this past summer to basically $10 a share, almost $11 a share just today. So, down basically by 40% since this summer. And they're not only dealing with fears about Middle East and terrorism, Frank, but of course, the higher oil prices is money straight out of the bottom line of the airlines. A number of them making new 52-week lows just today. So I don't think that's a bottom you want to pick anytime soon. And, Frank, as the airlines go, oftentimes Boeing goes as well. That stock has been weak as well. So I think that, there's better places to look for opportunities than airlines. I think that they're headed down. And once again, it goes back to higher oil prices, lower airline stocks.
All right. And we're following.
Former Navy SEAL Mike Ritland keeps it real on the Mike Drop podcast. Former Navy SEAL and current CrossFit King Dave Castro.
Is there one thing that you took away from the SEAL community that you apply kind of in your everyday life?
Here's the reality. So getting out was a no-brainer. Financially able to provide for my family much better with CrossFit than I was with the Navy. But if it hadn't been for CrossFit, I for sure would have stayed in for 20. I loved what I did.
Mike Drop. Raw. Unfiltered. Intellectually sound. Wherever you listen.
Of course, real estate closely, commercial real estate, but also residential, with the mortgage rates hitting a new 23-year high this week. Home prices here in the L.A. area still seem to be holding up pretty well despite the super high mortgage rates. So what do you see on the real estate front now?
Well, it's so cliche to say it, but it really is location. I mean, the market for real estate in, Secaucus, New Jersey, Frank, is going to be a lot different in your neck of the woods or in, Kansas City or anywhere. Looking at the big trends, however, for example, the publicly traded real estate companies, the trend really is down. I mean, as interest rates have gone up, the REITs, the real estate investment trusts, have gone down almost consistently. They're off by about 8% year to date. A lot of them just this past week at new 52-week lows. And, if you look at on paper, Frank, a lot of the real pain when it comes to real estate hasn't even really started yet. I mean, we haven't seen massive waves of foreclosures and bankruptcies in real estate as we did in 2008 and 2009. I'm not saying it has to happen, but a lot of those fundamental factors, most notably higher interest rates, is just going to put a major damper on the real estate moving forward. So when it comes to individuals and their own houses, I think now is a good time to, more than ever, own something you can afford and hesitate maybe on putting too much money into new purchases for real estate, given the fact that a lot of the indicators are prices are heading lower from here.
All right. Did you pick up anything else coming out of the bank earnings reports related to commercial real estate, which has been a sore point this year and continues to be?
What I did see, Frank, is actually J.P. Morgan, the stock itself start to perk up. And the banks have just been absolutely extraordinarily weak, big and small. The fact that even that stock was able to muster a little bit of a gain today, I think, is a little bit of an encouraging sign. I mean, the banks have been so consistently weak, and at the heart of that weakness really is the issue with interest rates. Many of them are holding on to bonds way below current market rates, and that's a factor that's not going away anytime soon. So, I think real estate is weak, but the fact we're starting to see maybe a little bit of a bottom in bank stocks could help the market, at least in the midterm and in intermediate term, start to form somewhat of a tradable bottom.
All right, and adding to the tally of uncertainty out there, what's happening in Washington and who's going to be the next House Speaker and all that, and I know you're following that as well, but certainly add political uncertainty to the mix here. Yeah,
I mean, the irony, Frank, is that as the circus in D.C. has gone on and on, so is that rally in the U.S. dollar. The dollar seems to be just the place people want to put their money, that safe haven. That's certainly benefiting us all in terms of helping to keep, our standard of life and quality of life high. So, so far that circus in D.C. hasn't impacted the markets too much. But, of course, the spending continues, and it's why I think that inflation story simply isn't going away. I mean, in the late 1970s, it took not only Carter, but Carter and Reagan really making some pretty dramatic spending cuts to get inflation under control. We just don't see that on the horizon in Washington, D.C. from any party right now, which is why I think inflation, despite all the boasting from the Biden administration, simply is going to be a factor, not just 6 months from now, but even a year or two from now as well.
All right, and the one economic engine that's firing on all cylinders these days is Taylor Swift, who was here in Los Angeles for the premiere of her movie. And I see AMC, the theater chain stock, got a big pop this week, pulling back today, right? But looks like her friendship bracelets are selling like hotcakes, and too bad we can't buy a stock in Taylor Swift, or can we somehow?
Well, I mean, look, it's great to see, entertainment rolling on. I mean, especially at a time, Frank, the whole entertainment business has been so hurt by, strikes and political unrest and whatnot. So, Taylor Swift seems like.
Right. Taylor Swift is certainly the winner this week with the fantastic premiere of the movie here in Los Angeles. And now NFL-themed friendship bracelets are selling big right now. And so we celebrate that one big bright spot. Jonathan Honig, thank you very much for joining us live here this evening on Mottek On Money. We always appreciate it. That is Jonathan Honig, Fox News contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, and the author of the book Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. Live with us here tonight on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. And we'll have the complete wrap-up of the day on Wall Street in just a moment. Friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate. And Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby, ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any other kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with insurance companies, and if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle this process alone. You need an expert in the process. The team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone right now under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Good evening. Well, stocks are ending the day mostly lower today, with the Dow clinging to a slight gain. The geopolitical situation, obviously the big concern this week with the war in Israel against terrorists, geopolitical fears intensifying, and the consumer confidence reading we got today showed a jump in inflation expectations and lower consumer confidence. Not a big surprise since we've seen gas and oil prices spike recently. The Dow came in for a closing gain of 39 points. The S&P 500 slipped 22, and the NASDAQ dropped 167 points. For the week, we did see the Dow gain nearly 1% for the week. The S&P 500 rose nearly 0.5% for the week, and the NASDAQ was down 0.2% for the week. Taking a look at the price of gold, it got a lift this week, in fact, climbing sharply today, with the price settling 3.1% higher to $1,941.50 an ounce. The price of oil surged again today amid fears over the war in the Middle East, with West Texas Intermediate crude oil rising nearly 6% today to settle at $87.69 a barrel. Also tightening U.S. sanctions on Russian crude sales, boosting oil prices. On that consumer confidence reading from the University of Michigan today, we saw that created concern in the markets. The survey showed consumers' one-year inflation expectations rising. Inflation already running hotter than where the Fed wants to see it. The Federal Reserve has been trying to bring down inflation by raising interest rates, so another rate hike might be on the table. We saw the banks in focus today, including J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, all reported earnings for the third quarter that were stronger than most analysts estimated. And we heard directly from the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, which is the largest bank in the United States. Jamie Dimon said the bank delivered solid results against a tough macroeconomic backdrop, now complicated by another war. And he also delivered some more commentary, pretty ominous. He said this may be the most dangerous time the world has seen in decades. Taking a look at some of the other movers today, in the pharmaceutical space, we see shares of Pfizer and other biotech drug makers falling this afternoon in extended hours after the market closed, after Pfizer slashed $9 billion in expected sales from its full-year outlook as it tries to shift to commercial approval of its Paxlovid COVID treatment. And it looks like Pfizer might be laying off people. Pfizer stock came under fire in August when the drug maker reported a drop in earnings because of weaker demand for COVID vaccines and antiviral drugs. We see not only Pfizer lower in after-hours trading, but some of the other biotech names, including shares of BioNTech, dropped 2% after hours, and shares of Moderna and Novavax, haven't mentioned these names, of course, since the pandemic days, all moving lower in after-hours trading. You see Dollar General shares surging nearly 9%, in fact, more than 9%, after that dollar store chain said that Todd Vazos was returning as the company's chief executive after retiring less than a year ago. And Microsoft down 1% after regulators in England today gave the go-ahead for the tech giant's nearly $69 billion acquisition of video game holding company Activision Blizzard, ending a long saga in that merger deal. United Health Group shares moving up nearly 3% today after the company reported stronger than expected earnings for the third quarter. Taking a look at some of the other action today, we want to take a look at how the cryptos performed. Let's take a look at Bitcoin moving down about $80 now at $26,879. Ethereum pulling back 6 at $1,553, and Doge at 6 cents. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC following the latest news coming out of the Middle East. Israel's war against Hamas terrorists has intensified following the surprise attack on Israel last weekend on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. Following the latest headlines from Haaretz, the Israeli news service, Israel recovering bodies in Gaza raids, Hamas rockets target central Israel. The Israeli Defense Force is striking Hezbollah's posts in southern Lebanon after an unidentified flying target infiltrated Israel. Residents of the West Bank settlement can leave shelters, it's being reported. We're also following what's happening closely with the evacuation of certain areas of the Gaza Strip in preparation for a possible additional Israeli action this weekend. Also, a solidarity march for Israel is set for this Sunday in West Los Angeles. Joining us now is Rabbi Marvin Heyer, one of the most influential rabbis in the world. Rabbi Heyer, the founder, CEO, and president of the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Museum of Tolerance in West Los Angeles. The center, of course, has become one of the foremost Jewish human rights agencies in the world. Rabbi Heyer, thank you very much for taking the call. And let me know when you have to get off the line for the Jewish Sabbath. Rabbi, thank you very much for joining us here now following the horrific events of this week. Give us an update on what you're hearing is happening in Israel and your reaction to these horrific events.
Well, first of all, let me say that Iran, ISIS, Hamas, and Hezbollah, what they're doing is really a repeat of what we had in early Nazism during the Second World War. Let's not repeat the mistakes of a time when Chamberlain visited Hitler, ceded the Sudetenland to Hitler, and then came home to England and declared peace in our time. And of course, it was ridiculous. Hitler was just using it as a ploy. And that's exactly what's happening with Iran, ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah. What they want is the destruction of Israel. They do not care. The mere fact that it's just unprecedented to have a mosque and use the mosque as a clearing point for all the leaders so that they can plan attacks against who? Children. Sending your soldiers from Hezbollah and ISIS and Hamas and telling them to go ahead and kill children, take pictures of it, show the world. That is only reminiscent of Adolf Hitler. And the world has to recognize that, and we have to do something about it. We do not want to make the mistakes that were made then, that we were fooled in the beginning by Hitler, and in the end, 50 million people paid with their lives, non-Jews, as well as Jews, gypsies. It didn't matter. They all paid with their lives. If we want a repetition of that, then we should keep quiet about what's going on with Iran, ISIS, Hamas, and Hezbollah. If we don't want a repetition of that, we've got to take them out. There's no way of saying
In 1995, veteran police officer Michael Chappell was convicted of armed robbery and murder and has spent the past 30 years in prison. The true crime podcast, In the Land of Lies, explores the untold side to this story, one that could prove Michael Chappell is actually innocent. See why people are calling In the Land of Lies incredible, phenomenal, and a must-hear podcast. Binge the entire series now, and new episodes are coming soon. Imperative Entertainment presents In the Land of Lies. Get the podcast wherever you listen.
Let's negotiate with them. Let's speak to them. You can't negotiate with Hitler's Nazis, and you can't negotiate with the Iranians-inspired ISIS, Hamas, and Hezbollah. There's only one thing you can do. Confront them, and confront them in a way in which whether they lose their lives or not, whatever it is, we have to confront them and finish them off.
On the Air Live with Rabbi Marvin Heyer. Rabbi, what's your reaction to these displays we've seen this week where you have candlelight vigils basically honoring terrorists?
It's unprecedented. It's unprecedented. Also, they used a mosque for the purpose of preparing attacks. And the world is supposed to say about that, oh, no, it's a mosque. No, it's not a mosque. It's world headquarters for terrorists. Has to be destroyed immediately, which is what will take place. We can't fool around with this. We can't be late about this because history has taught us what happened in the past when we did that. We must respond immediately, and we must respond fiercely. And we must, so that the Arab world, those who love Iran, ISIS, Hamas, and Hezbollah, will learn their lesson. So I hope when Israel is going in now, that they do just that. And as far as the criticism they may get around the world, let's remember the same criticism happened in the early stages of World War II, when we wanted to treat Adolf Hitler like a human being, instead of treating Adolf Hitler as an animal, a ferocious animal. Let's not make the same mistake again. We paid dearly for the last one.
Is it clear to you at this point that Iran is behind all of this? And do you expect a strike against Iran, given the nuclear program there?
Well, I think that Iran absolutely is behind this, and that basically we have to find out a way. Look, President Biden did the right thing, the way he addressed himself to the world, that we must confront what is happening now, and we have to make sure that Iran is confronted in a way in which basically they pay the price. We can't say to Iran, now that we've now that we've told you what the problem is and you've agreed to resolve it and solve it, we can't trust them. They're out to get nuclear weapons, and let everyone know if Iran ever acquired nuclear weapons, they would use them. So we must confront this. And the United States and other countries have to bound together and do it the quicker the better.
On the Air Live with Rabbi Marvin Heyer, you attended the big rally for Israel in Beverly Hills this week with Dr. Julian Gold, MD, the mayor of Beverly Hills, who was on this program yesterday. And now there's a solidarity march for Israel planned for this weekend in West Los Angeles. Rabbi, can you tell us more about that, please? Yes,
there will be, I think, thousands of people are coming from the synagogue of the Young Israel in West L.A. and coming to the Museum of Tolerance. There'll be many speakers, and we're going to say some of the points that I made to you now. Now, this is not a time to fool around. The last time we played that, too many innocent people in the world were killed, and what do we see now? Children. They run into a kibbutz and children are shot, and they're bleeding. Those are that's the way they spent the last moments of their lives. It's not what planet Earth wants. If we don't want it, we have to correct it. Otherwise, we will be responsible.
The unthinkable has happened, Rabbi. We're going to keep an open line to you, and thank you very much for taking the call this evening. We wish you and everyone there all the very best. Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. Thank you very, very much.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much. Bye.
Rabbi Marvin Heyer, the founder, CEO, and president of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in West Los Angeles. Very shortly, I'll be joined by Lisa Daftari, the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. That and more coming up here, and as we continue our coverage on the horrific events of the week and the war on Israel, and the news here tonight that Israel's military has ordered 1 million people to leave Gaza, raising fears a ground offensive could be underway very soon, escalating tensions in the region. Of course, we'll be covering this through the weekend. The future of joint pain relief is here. It's called QC Kinetics, Advanced Regenerative Medicine. Absolutely amazing stuff. Now, if you've been told more steroids or surgery are your only options, don't be so fast. Get a second opinion and learn more about how you can harness your body's own healing agents to attack that joint pain. Now, I'm talking about lasting pain relief. QC Kinetics doesn't mask the pain. These treatments go right to the very root of the problem using concentrated healing properties placed directly in your joint to restore and repair that damaged joint tissue. Imagine living your life this fall with no more pain in your knees, hips, shoulders, or back. No drugs, no surgery, and no downtime. Life's about motion, and QC Kinetics is giving people their lives back with these all-natural treatments. Call QC Kinetics for a free consultation, the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. QC Kinetics, locations in Glendale, the city of Orange, Mission Viejo, and now also in Costa Mesa. The number to call is 213-997-PAIN. 213-997-PAIN. Again, that's 213-997-PAIN. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC following the latest news from the Middle East. Looks like Israeli forces have carried out localized raids within the outskirts of the Gaza Strip in order to complete scanning the border area for infiltrating Hamas terrorists, according to a statement from the Israeli military. During efforts to locate missing persons, Israeli forces killed Hamas terror units, including one that fired an anti-tank guided missile, according to the Jerusalem Post. The IDF said it was conducting widespread airstrikes across the Gaza Strip targeting Hamas terrorists. Palestinian reports noted that a hospital in the northern strip was told to evacuate immediately by the IDF. We're watching the situation very, very closely. We just spoke to Rabbi Marvin Heyer, the founder, CEO, and president of the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Museum of Tolerance in West Los Angeles. Joining us live now is Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, who was honored by the Simon Wiesenthal Center this year with the Medal of Valor for defending human rights and for her work in highlighting the ongoing courageous protests by Iranian women against the Islamic Republic following the death of an Iranian woman at the hands of the Islamic Morality Police last year. Lisa Daftari, thank you very much for taking the call here tonight and for following all of this with us here. First of all, your reaction to the latest news and the unfolding action happening this evening.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for covering these important developments and underscoring the importance of it to the American audience, which I hope to do as well. There's two things we're following here. First is, of course, developments unfolding overnight from Gaza. The Israeli army, of course, gave the warning to the international community, first to Hamas and then to the UN, that they suggest that 1.1 million civilians evacuated move south because they are coming through. This is something that is given as a courtesy. Obviously, that is not what Hamas did when they came in to kill civilians, and kill is such an understatement with the massacre, the ISIS-type massacre that they unfolded last Saturday morning. Very, very different if you want to compare the two styles of the armies. And how this is moving forward. The second thing we're following today, of course, is the day of rage that was announced by Hamas. A lot of schools in California, as well as New York, Florida, whether they be vigilant, parents keeping their children home, and a lot of schools closed. I know some law schools and some other schools in the area of Jewish and otherwise were closed because of the threat. There was a stabbing in France, another stabbing in Beijing. They were all related to this Hamas day of rage that was announced, basically a day of jihad, where they asked Muslims and believers and supporters of Hamas from around the world to attack non-believers. This is not just Jews, it is Christians and atheists and even Muslims who will not fold under the Hamas flag. And that is why we have been so vigilant for the last 12 hours at least, if not more.
You're an expert on Iran and have done an amazing job telling the stories about the courageous protests by women in Iran, primarily against the Islamic Republic, following the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini at the hands of the morality police in Iran last year. And we started the week with that Wall Street Journal report pointing to Iran behind this attack on Israel. What other information do we have about Iran's connection to all this?
Yeah, we had the UN ambassador from Iran, rather, admitting this week that Iran did have involvement with this. Of course, we are seeing admission from the Iran regime. We are seeing admission throughout the ranks of Hamas, thanking Iran's regime for their support in this attack, but we are not seeing any admission from the White House that has cleaned its hands from this narrative that Iran has anything to do with this plot, which is very troublesome. We see even in the writings, this description of what is happening, the White House has scraped the name of the Iran regime and really sanitized the narrative to say that the Iran's regime was not involved. And when asked, they have denied or played dumb about any involvement by Iran's regime. Even Antony Blinken, while traveling throughout the Middle East and going to Israel, was asked again whether Iran's regime was involved, and he said that he does not have any information about that. Of course, this is extremely troublesome. We know that Iran's regime did write the checks, as you said. The Wall Street Journal report not only pointed to the fact that Iran financed this war, but that Iran was behind it in a very detailed manner. The report obviously goes back a few months, and Israeli intel believes that this attack was planned for more than a few months, but what the Wall Street Journal does is at least outline the last few months where meetings that were extremely focused with 4 different terror groups that Iran supports met Iran's regime in Beirut to give them the green light, to give them the okay, to give them the details. And we know that they were involved financially, tactically, and perhaps in training the Hamas terrorists in terms of going in and carrying the attack last week.
And now reports, I'm looking at the Jerusalem Post here, Israeli artillery tanks fired Hezbollah after a Lebanon border blast. So we're watching that front as well now. Yes, absolutely. And that's been the fear all along, whether the North would get involved as well. That is Hezbollah being another proxy of Iran's regime. It would make absolute sense that they would jump in at this moment and surround Israel from the north and the south, giving them a much bigger challenge in terms of fighting both fronts. The United States has said that they are watching this, but should Hezbollah or Lebanon's cancerous cells begin to get involved in a significant way, then we will have a very different war that will take on a tremendously new and dangerous dimension. We're at a critical moment here for the entire world, and now the question is, and you follow this very, very closely, how close is Iran to have nuclear capabilities, and do you think Israel will go in at this point? You know, Israel has been watching all along. Obviously, we have seen targeted attacks by Israel's security forces on Iranian stockpiles because they have to. This is an existential threat, as we can see, and as has folded over the last 7 days. You know, that's a question. And whenever anyone asks me how close they are to nuclear capability, I say, well, we're assuming they don't have it already. Why wouldn't they, right? We know that the centrifuges have been spinning. We know that they are enriching uranium over 60%, perhaps higher. We know that they turned off the IAEA cameras. That is the UN nuclear watchdog that is supposed to be watching and making sure with surveillance that Iran's regime is not going beyond a certain point in terms of its nuclear development. And we know that they have not been compliant. They have shut off the cameras. They have denied access to the inspectors. So we will assume that they don't have that capability, full capability yet, perhaps not in terms of delivery. But we have had different accounts tell us they're a week away, 2 weeks away, a month away. We know that the time is short. We know that they're very close to it. And we know that they have leverage right now. They have every reason to believe that they have become empowered, that they have nothing to fear, and that they are the ones who are calling the shots. Look at all of their activity throughout the region, their proxies, doing the dirty work for them. They have forces in Yemen and in Syria and Iraq and Lebanon and, of course, in South America. They're growing their presence there as well at the footbed of America. And, of course, we know about their influence here in Washington, D.C., and all over the United States in our universities and, of course, throughout Washington and in different parts of government. Lisa Dafchari, the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, thank you very much for taking the call. We'll keep the line open to you. In the meantime, overwhelming support for Israel here in Southern California. Solidarity March for Israel set for this Sunday, starting at Young Israel of Century City in West Los Angeles. This is Mottek On Money. Stay tuned for Royal Oaks and the 790 KBC News Blitz. You're on 790 KBC.
Former Navy SEAL Mike Ritland keeps it real on the Mike Drop podcast. Former Navy SEAL and current CrossFit King Dave Castro.
Is there one thing that you took away from the SEAL community that you apply kind of in your everyday life?
Here's the reality. So getting out was a no-brainer. Financially able to provide for my family much better with CrossFit than I was with the Navy. But if it hadn't been for CrossFit, I for sure would have stayed in for 20. I loved what I did.
Mike Drop. Raw, unfiltered, intellectually sound. Wherever you listen.